Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about Jane. She's been teasing everyone for quite a while, but she's finally released. So it took some time to do some field testing, but also to run some calculations on different builds so you can get the maximum damage from your Jane. I'm also going to explain her unique mechanics and some team examples so you can get ready to run Jane whenever and wherever you want. Now before we begin, I want to point out that my Discord server is up and running. If you want to join the community, feel free to click on the link down in the description. That's it. A really quick self-add here, back to the video. So Jane is our very first limited Anomaly unit. She was playable ever since the first day of the 1.1 patch and she's a really solid unit. Just like all Anomaly units, her main source of damage is, of course, going to be Anomaly triggers. Anomaly still makes up around 80% of her total damage. Now I'm going to start talking about her core mechanics, and the very first thing that you're going to notice here is that gray bar right below your portrait. This is your passion gauge and it's a secondary resource that's available for Jane, and a lot of her damage is actually tied to this gauge. Dealing damage, dodging, and using defensive assists will build up this passion gauge. Once it's full, you're going to enter the passion state. It gives increased attack for Jane based on her anomaly proficiency, extra build up, and access to some different movesets. You're going to need a total of 420 anomaly proficiency in order to get the maximum 600 attack for Jane. It may seem quite a lot, but trust me, you can achieve this without a problem. One point that is really important here is that despite the description being tied to your basic attack, leveling up your basic attack won't change how passion state scales and works. So you don't need to worry to level up your basic attack as fast as possible. During the passion state, dealing damage to the enemy will deplete your passion gauge. Dodges and defensive assist will still build up passion for you. Dodge counters will consume since they are dealing damage to the enemy, but it's quite similar to the amount you're getting, so you can spend dodge counters for free. You also get access to some basic attacks skips and Salchow Jump, which is a special basic attack. You can use it by holding down your basic attack button as long as you have Salchow Jump uses available. This red dot right here. It has a decent build up on the enemy, and once the maximum duration is reached or you release the basic attack button, you're going to do a finishing move. If you ever used Piper X special, then it's really similar. You're also invulnerable during the finishing move, so you can use it to avoid taking damage. But the main use here is to actually rebuild your passion gauge. Yep, that's right, using Salchow Jump will refill your passion gauge when dealing damage to the enemy. I personally highly recommend you to use it under the passion state. Since your stats are being snapshotted when building Anomaly, it's better for you to simply extend your passion uptime instead of letting it go and rebuilding as fast as possible. If something I just said doesn't make sense for you, then you can check my Anomaly guide that I'll be linking down in the description, but also right here in the corner. As for basic attack skips, the very first one is dash attack. Using a dash attack lets you follow up straight with her basic attack 4. So you can go for dash attack, basic attack 4, 5, 6 instead of starting from your basic attack 1. Funny enough, Salchow Jump finishing move will link straight into a dash attack, so you can easily spam your attack button after finishing Salchow Jump for a dash attack into basic attack 4, 5, 6. Another skip that you'll get access is the dodge counter and quick assist skip. Using either of them will follow up with a basic attack 5. This lets you go for dodge counter or quick assist into basic attack 5, 6, which builds up a lot of anomaly on the enemy and also has some iframes. It's really good and just reinforces how good it is to dodge using Jane. Chain attacks and ultimate will also instantly refresh your passion state. You get a full passion gauge and Salchow Jump uses, but since this happens before the chain attack or ultimate damage animation, you actually lose some passion, so it's not going to be completely full. This is far from a problem, since as I pointed out, your Salchow Jump uses are refreshed as well. I won't get in details about every single skill here, because since she's mostly a good sustained DPS that also relies a lot on dodges, rotation and efficiency of different skills will fluctuate. But I just want to point out that your X special deals a good build up on the enemy, but also refills quite a lot of your passion gauge. I'd recommend you to use X specials under passion state and mostly for build up, since using outside of your passion state you build up some low damage anomaly on the enemy. Your ultimate is also quite fast and has a really great AoE, so while it's not the best idea to use Grace or Piper's ultimate, Jane has a really good ultimate. Don't think twice and just use it to finish your burst rotation that I'll be explaining later on the video. The next big mechanic here is her core skill. Jane debuffs enemies when dealing damage to them, and this debuff will increase the duration of flinch and also lets any assault on the enemy to deal critical damage. This critical damage won't scale with your critical stats, and the only thing you can do is get enough anomaly proficiency to hit 100% crit rate on assaults. Here's how much anomaly proficiency you need in order to hit 100% crit rate. As you can see, Core E is the exact same amount of AP from your Passion state. So going for Core F is not exactly necessary, but can increase your damage since Core F gives you some extra base attack. Her additional ability gives some extra build-up, which is really good for Jane, especially if you're not running her signature weapon. You can get up to 35% extra build-up just on your additional ability. For skill upgrade priority, you should focus on your core and leveling up Jane all the way to 60. Everything else gives low damage increase, but this multiplier can help you stun the enemy on longer rotations, so feel free to level them up as needed. Basic attack and dodges are your top priority, followed by X special and chain attacks. You barely use Jane defensive assist, so leave this as your last priority. Jane is mostly a sustained DPS thanks to all the good build-up you find on her kit, but she relies a bit too much on dodges to keep a good uptime on her Passion state. This can be problematic if you're dealing with a slower enemy since your Passion uptime can fall off. In this case, some players actually like to pair Jane with Chin-Yi or Stunner and focus mostly on the damage you deal under the stun window. Chain attack will always refresh your Passion state, so you can simply focus on your burst rotation. Speaking of burst rotations, from my tests, your top priority here is to get a total of 3 assaults on the enemy under the stun window. You're not exactly tied to this rotation that I use because your build-up can vary depending on a lot of different factors such as enemy resistance, teammates, and also, of course, weapon and your stats. The rotation I'm using to achieve a consistent 3 assault trigger on stun window is chain attack, triggering an assault, then you go into a dash attack followed by a full Salchow Jump and finisher, then you spend your basic attack to do the automatic dash attack follow-up, basic attack 4 into X special, and as soon as you trigger assault, I use my ultimate to trigger the finishing assault. Sometimes the ultimate alone won't be enough to trigger assault, so you need to change and test depending on how much anomaly you are building up on the enemy. For example, you can use 2 X specials before the Salchow Jump since Salchow Jump can trigger assault while you are spinning. Once triggered, just use your ultimate, and this will refresh your Salchow Jump for another use to trigger the finishing assault. Oh, and as you may notice here, it seems ultimates can actually bypass the Anomaly internal cooldown. As you can see here, if we don't take into account the ultimate cinematic, I managed to hit 2 assaults under the 3 seconds from the Anomaly cooldown. I don't know why this happens, but hey, if you're building a lot of anomaly on your ultimate, yes, you can easily use Jane's ultimate to trigger another assault. So in conclusion, rotation is super flexible. You need to find your own build up against specific bosses and slowly optimize your rotation. Before going into her builds and team compositions, let's take a quick look at her Mindscapes, because they can increase your DPS by quite a lot. Mindscape 1 gives you an extra use of Salchow Jump, so your Passion uptime is increased. But that's not everything. You also get up to 30% extra damage and also 50% build up under the Passion state. This is mostly a mini signature weapon because the signature value and the uptime is actually higher than this Mindscape. Mindscape 2 is completely out of this world. You're getting a 50% defense shred on Jane and an extra 50% crit damage for Jane's core. Since assaults is your main source of damage, this Mindscape actually increases your damage by quite a lot. It's the highest increase between all the Mindscapes, as you can see, and just to point out, this is 50% defense shred. It means it's multiplicative with penetration instead of additive. If you don't know how penetration works, then I highly recommend you to check my penetration build comparison video. Mindscape 3 and 5 only increases your skill levels, so their impact in your total DPS is close to none. Mindscape 4 gives you an extra multiplier for all your squad anomaly damage. This gives some interesting increase depending on units you're using, since the damage increase is for all your squad. Her last Mindscape is actually a bit weird. It's a 20% crit rate and a 40% crit damage for Jane. Being a unit that stays on the field quite a lot, I can understand why crit stats may feel useful, but overall, your main source of damage is still going to be Anomaly. These crit stats won't apply in your assault, so it's mostly for Jane basic attacks damage. The best part here is honestly the 100% uptime on your passion state. You don't need to worry anymore after your first assault because every other assault is going to trigger passion state. You also get some extra damage, but the damage itself is quite small. To make it simple, if you're looking for Mindscapes, going for Mindscape 2 is the best stop for you. Going for further Mindscape is fine, especially if you're looking for a name card, but as always, only spend what you can. Now, before talking about her builds, we're going over some weapon comparison. As you can see, I did my best to calculate a lot of different scenarios, which include both standard and burst rotation. You can see how good her signature weapon is due to the fact that it's really easy for you to keep 100% uptime on this effect. It gives you a really good damage bonus, but also some extra build-up for faster assaults on the enemies. Lip Gloss is the next on the list, which also is really easy for you to keep 100% uptime, especially since Jane extends even further the flinch debuff on the enemy. Whipping Gemini value can fluctuate depending on how many anomalies you are triggering on the enemy. Assuming Jane is the only anomaly character in your team, you can see that the ramp up time will take a heavy hit in your overall damage. The very first assault won't benefit from a single stack from Gemini, so the damage is going to be really low. Rainforest Gourmet gives some anomaly proficiency as a secondary stat, so it's a fine addition, but the weapon effect rarely will be used under your standard rotation, since it's best for you to save X specials to guarantee 3 assaults on the stun window. Feature Compiler gets even worse since it gives no anomaly proficiency, and just like Gourmet, you won't benefit from this effect. On burst rotation, you can see the DPS difference between her signature and other A rank gets smaller. That's because the stun window is fixed and you're only able to hit 3 assaults on the stun window. You can probably run attack disc 6 on her signature, but the build-up loss outside of your stun rotation can be quite significant for your DPS. Overall, her signature weapon will give you a 20% damage increase, which is really good, since besides the DPS, her signature also makes your rotation even better and helps you even further hitting 3 assaults on the stun window. Fusion Compiler is still in the bottom since you're not getting anomaly proficiency from it. It's just penetration, and the anomaly proficiency requires you to cast your X special. But this made me realize that I should run another test using Seth because he gives up to 100 anomaly proficiency for Jane. This way, you lower the value from anomaly proficiency weapons since you cap both passion attack and assault crit rate as well. And so I did. And as you can see, the difference is quite interesting. Fusion Compiler is not that bad anymore because you're already hitting a good anomaly proficiency value. Whipping Gemini actually gets even worse due to the hump up time, but at the same time, lower stacks won't hit your DPS as much as before. Since this is a lot of information, I won't go through everything and instead let me make it simple for you. Her signature is the best option for you. It's around 23% DPS increase when compared to the best free option. If you don't want to spend your pulse on Jane's signature weapon, then Lip Gloss is consistent over any playstyle, but you still need to buy the Battle Pass. For a completely free option, Whipping Gemini is the best option as long as you're giving time for Jane to build up stacks before stunning the enemy. Fusion Compiler is only a viable option if you're running Seth. Otherwise, it's the worst possible option. Rainforest Gourmet is also quite complicated because you hardly benefit from it properly. Now for her build, this set is quite simple. You're going for Fanged Metal 4-piece effect. Freedom Blues 4-piece isn't necessary unless you're struggling with the 3 assault under the stun window, which can be fixed using other means, because losing the 35% damage from Fanged Metal is quite hard for Jane. 2-piece is usually going to be Freedom Blues. Hormone Punk can be used, but I wouldn't recommend it unless you happen to hit a lot of anomaly proficiency substat rolls in your Hormone Punk. For main stats, you're going for anomaly proficiency in your disc number 4. There's simply no other option here. Jane heavily scales with anomaly proficiency, and disc 4 is the only source of anomaly proficiency as your main stat. Disc 5 is usually going to be physical damage. If you're running her signature, especially on higher phases, you can actually run attack or penetration here, especially if you're pairing Rina with Jane. Without her signature, you'll lack damage multiplier, so physical damage is the best overall option. Disc 6 is 100% anomaly mastery. The only scenario where you can run attack here is when you're using her signature and you're using Jane as a burst DPS, focusing only on stun windows damage. In other words, just go for attack if you're speedy running shield defense, otherwise anomaly mastery is the best choice. For substat priority, anomaly proficiency is always your top priority. This doesn't mean that you should completely ignore attack rolls, they just come next as your priority. Attack ratio is of course way better than flat attack, followed by penetration rolls. Crit rolls isn't your top priority, but it's not the end of the world, since Jane takes a good field time and also gets some good attack. For take compositions, we actually have some different things depending on how you're planning to play Jane. Overall, the best teammate here is Seth. He can help a lot with Jane's anomaly proficiency requirements, while also offering a free freedom boost for her. The last slot is super flexible and, as I said, depends on how you're playing Jane. Lucy can be used for a hyper carry Jane, since Lucy field time is quite low and extra attack also helps with anomaly damage. If your Nicole is unlocked to a GU1 team, you can also slot her here for some extra damage on your burst window. Just remember the defense threat is a stat tied to the enemy, so you need to trigger an assault, while Nicole's debuff is on the enemy. Rina can be used instead of Nicole for close to the same effect, although Rina Mindscape 1 is highly recommended. Mindscape 0 requires a lot of switches to refresh Rina's buff, so it can be a bit hard for you to pilot. If you want to play a stunner in your team and instead focus on burst window damage, Qin Yi is really solid. The stun multiplier will increase your assault damage even further, and Qin Yi with Seth can trigger some extra shocks for extra damage. I would recommend Embi since she also wants a lot of field time, but unlike Qin Yi, she won't give any benefit for Jane. Grace can be used for disorder focused teams, but this requires you to master 2 different units. Besides that, depending on your weapon choice for Jane, you won't have enough time to field Grace under the stun window, so things can get really complicated. I didn't run Grace Jane calculations since this is a high skill ceiling team that honestly I don't even know if it works. If you have any opinion or even practice with Grace Jane, let me know what you think about this thing, because I'm honestly really curious if someone can make this happen. And just to make it clear, in case someone had this idea, Jane Piper is a big no, because you won't find any time to use Piper instead of Jane. There's simply no reason for you to field Piper over Jane, so going for Jane Piper is completely useless. For Bangboos, you don't have a lot of great options here. Lucky Boo and Magnetic Boo are my personal recommendations, since they don't take stun time from you. Offset Sui might be a good option, but the problem is that you need to use their chain attack, which makes you lose some valuable time for Jane. Same goes for Bang Volver, but Bang Volver is even trickier to activate since it requires 2 physical units. If you're running 2 electric units, you can also consider going for Plug Boo. And lastly, if you find energy could help you with exit specials, then Bursher or even Butler can be used, but I don't think it's necessary for you. And that sums up everything about Jane. This video was supposed to be released yesterday, but after doing some tests, I decided it was for the best to delay a bit more and gather more data before uploading this video. If you found this video helpful, consider giving a like and also share the info with your friends. If you want more zzzero content, remember to subscribe as well. As usual, thanks for watching. Have a beautiful day, and I'll see you in my next video.